A guy I'll call David, 61, software engineer, told me he opens the same spreadsheet every Friday night. $720,000 in his 401k. No mortgage. Kids are out of the house. By every measure he's writ about, he should be close. But every Friday night, he closes the laptop and decides one more year. Not because the number is too small. He knows the number is fine. It's a different question that stops him. The one he hasn't been able to answer yet. If I stop working next month, where does my health insurance come from? And what does it actually cost? I've watched this happen more times than I can count. Someone does everything right for 30 years. They save consistently, they don't overspend, they show up. And then they get to this exact moment, and they stall. Not dramatically. Just quietly keep saying yes to one more Monday. That gap has a price tag. For most people in the 59 to 65 window, it runs over $1,000 a month. Sometimes a lot more. And it almost never shows up in the standard retirement planning conversation. That's what this video is about. Not whether you should retire early or late. That's your call, and I'm not here to make it for you. What I want to do is show you the number you've probably been avoiding calculating, because once you know it, you stop guessing, and you stop letting the uncertainty make the decision for you. That's the goal, anyway. Let's start with the number. If you're still working at 59, 60, 61, that doesn't mean you failed at planning. It means you're navigating a decision that's genuinely hard inside a system that doesn't make it easier. I want to be clear about that before we go any further. Most people in this situation aren't behind. They're uncertain, and uncertainty has a way of producing the same answer every time one more year. It feels responsible. Stay employed, keep the benefits, let the account grow a little more. What's the downside of being careful? I've seen people ask that question at 59, then again at 61, then again at 63. A teacher I'll describe, 63 years old, 3 years passed when she first planned to retire. Every year she told herself one more. Every year she added roughly $18,000 to her savings. What she didn't calculate was what those years cost on the other side of the ledger. Her daughter called her one evening after a family birthday party. Not to complain, just to say she wished her mom had been more present that afternoon. She'd been there physically, but she'd driven 4 hours after a full week of work, and she'd fallen asleep on the couch before the cake was cut. That's not a financial loss, but it's a real one. It doesn't show up on a spreadsheet, but it adds up. Now, the financial side of one more year is also worth running through, because the math surprises most people. Say you're earning $100,000 a year. After federal and state taxes, you're taking home closer to $72,000. Subtract what it actually costs to work. Commuting, lunches, the spending that happens because you're tired and don't feel like cooking. Call it $8,000 a year conservatively. Your real take-home is around $64,000. 2 years of that gets you $128,000 in additional savings. Now here's the part people skip. That $128,000 doesn't become $128,000 of retirement income. At a 4% withdrawal rate, a standard planning benchmark, it generates about $5,120 a year. That's roughly $427 a month. Sit with that for a second. 2 years of your life, in exchange for $427 a month. Before taxes on the withdrawal, that's not nothing. But it's worth knowing what you're actually trading. And nearly half of people who plan to work longer don't end up making that trade on their own terms anyway. A 2024 survey from the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that around 46% of retirees left work earlier than planned, not by choice, but because of health changes, caregiving responsibilities, or a layoff. The plan to work 2 more years assumes those 2 years are yours to control. They often aren't. So the on more year instinct isn't irrational. but it's solving for the wrong problem. It's adding to the account without addressing what's actually driving the hesitation. And that thing driving the hesitation, for most people, isn't the savings balance at all. I want to tell you about someone I'll call Mark, 60 years old, telecom engineer. By the numbers, he was ready. Mortgage paid off, $850,000 in his 401k. Social Security projection of around $2,200 a month when he claimed. He'd run the retirement calculators. Everything came back green. Then he did the one thing most people do last, if they do it at all. He called an insurance broker and asked for an ACA quote. Him and his wife, both 60, non-smokers, reasonably healthy. Silver plan, one of the standard options. The number came back at $2,100 a month. Not annually, monthly, before the deductible, which ran $7,000 per person. He thanked the broker, hung up, and called his HR department to push his retirement date back another year. Not because he couldn't afford it, technically, because he had never seen that number before, and it landed like something he hadn't planned for. Which it was. I've seen this scenario repeat itself enough times that it stopped surprising me. It's not about savings. It's about a specific line item that almost nobody runs in advance. For a couple retiring at 60 in 2025, the numbers look something like this. An ACA Silver plan for two people around that age, with a household income of roughly $80,000 a year, runs somewhere between $1,200 and $2,100 a month, depending on the state, if your income sits above 400% of the federal poverty level, which for a couple is around $79,840 in 2025. You lose subsidy eligibility entirely. At that point, you're looking at full price, unassisted. Add in deductibles and out-of-pocket costs, and the realistic 5-year total from age 60 to Medicare at 65 lands somewhere between $72,000 and $168,000, just for coverage. That range doesn't appear on most retirement planning calculators. It's not a line in the standard conversation. And because it's invisible in the planning phase, it shows up as a shock in the execution phase. I used to assume the ACA marketplace was a reasonable fallback for most people, that the subsidy structure would make it workable. After looking at the actual numbers by income bracket and by state, I think that's too optimistic a read. It can be workable, but only if you plan around it deliberately, not if you discover it the week you're thinking about handing in your notice. The people who get caught off guard tend to do one of two things. They go back to work because the number feels unmanageable, or they pick a lower tier plan to keep costs down and absorb more risk on the medical side. Neither is a good outcome when it was avoidable. The people who handle it well figured out that this number isn't fixed. It moves based on how you structure your income. And that's a very different problem to solve than do I have enough saved. The right question isn't can I afford retirement? It's can I structure my income so that retirement doesn't cost me $2,000 a month just to stay insured. That's a solvable problem. The other one is a feeling. And for most people in this window, the answer is yes. But it requires knowing 3 specific levers before you make any moves. I hear some version of the same question fairly often. How is this not in every retirement video? It's a fair question. The healthcare gap between 59 and 65 is one of the most consistent financial obstacles I see in this stage of life. It's not obscure, it's not rare, and yet it gets maybe 30 seconds of airtime in most planning conversations, if it comes up at all. The reason isn't hard to find once you look at who's doing the talking. Most retirement planning content is built around accumulation. How much to save? Which accounts to use? How to grow the number? That's the product. Asset management fees run on a percentage of what you have invested. So the longer you accumulate and the bigger the pile, the better it works out for the people managing it. There's nothing sinister in that. It's just an incentive structure. And it doesn't naturally point toward a conversation about how to minimize your insurance costs between 60 and 65. Your employer, similarly, doesn't have a strong reason to walk you through this. A clear explanation of the ACA subsidy structure and how to use it effectively is essentially a roadmap for leaving sooner. That's not a conversation most HR departments are set up to have. The information is public. IRS income thresholds, healthcare, gov quotes that take 10 minutes. But nobody has a reason to connect the dots for you. There's a stat from JP Morgan's 2024 retirement research that I think about in this context. More than 70% of retirees end up paying more in taxes during their first 5 years of retirement than they did in their last 5 years of working. The primary reasons: pulling from accounts in the wrong order and not having a healthcare cost structure in place ahead of time. That's not bad luck. That's a planning gap that nobody flagged early enough. If you're in the 59 to 65 window right now, that gap is still yours to close. I don't have a clean answer for every situation here. Different states, different income levels, different family structures. The numbers shift in ways that matter. What I can tell you is that there are 3 levers that apply broadly, and understanding them changes how you see the problem. Because the monthly insurance number you get quoted isn't your final answer. It's a starting point, and where you land depends almost entirely on decisions you make before you retire, not after. So here's what you can actually control. The monthly number an insurance broker quotes you is not fixed. It's a function of your reported income, specifically your MAGI, modified adjusted gross income. That's the number the ACA uses to determine whether you qualify for a premium tax credit and how much. In 2025, a couple needs to stay below roughly $79,840 in MAGI to qualify for subsidies. Cross that line, even by a few $1,000s, and the credit phases out. Go far enough over it, and you lose subsidy eligibility entirely. That's the subsidy cliff. And it's where most people get hurt without realizing it. A couple with MAGI around $75,000 might pay $300 to $500 a month for a silver plan after the tax credit. The same couple at $85,000 MAGI could be paying $1,800 to $2,200 for the same coverage. Same ages, same plan. The only difference is $10,000 of reportable income and a $16,000 to $20,000 annual swing in insurance costs. That's not a rounding error. That's the whole game. Now, the thing people miss is that MAGI during retirement is largely something you can engineer. It's not what's sitting in your accounts. It's what you choose to recognize as income in a given year, which means the decisions you make about when to pull from which accounts and in what amounts directly determine what you pay for health insurance. 3 things move that number. The first one is the most counterintuitive. The first is income sequencing. In the early retirement years, before Social Security and before RMDs kick in, you have a window where you can draw from different sources and keep your MAGI at a level that qualifies for meaningful subsidies. Think of it as choosing which pocket you pull from. Some pockets are visible to the ACA, some aren't. Roth distributions don't count toward MAGI. Neither does the return of basis from a taxable brokerage account. Knowing which dollars show up on the ACA's radar and which don't is what makes this lever work. The second lever is the Roth conversion window. Ages 60 to 65 are often the lowest income years of your adult life. Lower than your working years, lower than when Social Security and RMDs start stacking up later. That makes this period the cheapest time to convert traditional IRA money into Roth. You pay tax now at a lower rate, reduce future RMD pressure, and gain more flexibility over your MAGI in the years ahead. It's not about avoiding tax. It's about paying it when it costs you less. That's a different calculation than most people are running. The third lever is the HSA bridge. If you choose a high-deductible health plan through the ACA marketplace, which many people do specifically to keep premiums lower. You remain eligible to contribute to a health savings account until Medicare begins. The HSA is the one account that doesn't get taxed going in, growing, or coming out, as long as you spend it on medical costs. For the gap years, that's a meaningful edge. The 2025 family contribution limit is $8,550. If you've been building an HSA balance through your working years, that money can absorb deductibles and out-of-pocket costs during the gap years without touching your investment accounts or affecting your MAGI. I've seen people spend years building detailed accumulation spreadsheets, tracking every contribution, every rebalance. Then they hit 60 and realize they've never built the withdrawal phase equivalent. The same rigor that went into growing the pile needs to go into how you draw it down, because that's when the structure actually matters. Income sequencing and the HSA work the same side of the problem, keeping costs down and keeping accounts untouched. The Roth conversion works the long side, reducing what you'll owe later. None of them require perfect execution, but they do require knowing they exist before you make your first move. Let me show you what the difference actually looks like. Same starting point. A guy I'll call Robert, 61 years old, decent savings, still working. He knows retirement is close. He just hasn't done the healthcare math yet. In the first version of his story, he keeps pushing the date. Not because anything is wrong, just because the insurance question feels complicated and he hasn't sat down with it. He figures he'll deal with it when the time comes. At 63, his company goes through a restructuring. His position is eliminated. He's given a severance package in 60 days. Now he's dealing with it. Ciobare lets him stay on his employer plan temporarily. The cost, $1,850 a month. He doesn't have an ACA plan structured. His income that year is uneven from the severance, and he ends up over the subsidy threshold anyway. So he pays full price, $1,850 a month for 18 months while he figures out next steps. That's $33,300, without a single doctor's visit beyond routine care. Meanwhile, the stress of the unexpected exit pushes him to pull from his 401k earlier than planned. That withdrawal bumps his taxable income further, locks him out of ACA subsidies for another year, and gets taxed at a higher bracket than it needed to be. He ends up fine, eventually, but the exit cost him significantly more than it had to. And it happened on someone else's timeline, not his. Now the second version. Same Robert, same age, same savings. But 6 months earlier, while he's still employed, he spends a few hours running the healthcare numbers. He gets an actual ACA quote for his state. He maps out what his MAGI will look like in the first year of retirement if he pulls $60,000 from his traditional IRA versus $75,000. He starts a small Roth conversion that year to begin shifting the balance. When his income drops at retirement, his MAGI lands at $74,000. His ACA Silver plan costs $620 a month. He retires at 62 deliberately, on his own schedule. The difference between those two outcomes, just on the insurance side, just for 18 months, is $22,140. Before you factor in the tax costs of the unplanned 401k withdrawal. The money gap between these two versions of Robert is real. But it's not the most important gap. The more important one is this: the first Robert lost the ability to choose. He got pushed out, unprepared, into a decision he hadn't made yet. The second Robert made the decision. Same financial position, roughly. Completely different experience of the transition. That's what planning in this window actually buys you. Not a guarantee of a perfect outcome. Just the ability to move on your terms rather than someone else's. Most people think retirement optionality is about having a big enough number. It's not quite that. It's about knowing your costs clearly enough that you can act when you're ready. Not when someone else decides you should. Think about the last time you used an online retirement calculator. You probably entered your savings balance, your expected expenses, maybe a retirement age. You got a projection, green bar or red bar, or somewhere in between. Did it have a line for health insurance costs before 65? Most of the popular ones don't. There's no field for the Medicare gap. No prompt asking what an ACA plan would actually run in your state at your income level. The calculator gives you a picture of retirement that's missing one of the largest fixed costs in the first 5 years. So before you say one more year, run these 3 numbers first. First number to know your MAGI target. MAGI is the income number the ACA uses to calculate your subsidy. It's not your net worth. It's not your total withdrawals. It's specifically what gets reported as income in a given year. And in early retirement, you have more control over it than most people realize. The threshold to know for 2025 is $79,840 for a couple. Stay under that, and you're in subsidy range. Go over it, even by a small amount, and your monthly premium can jump by $1,000 or more. I watched this happen to a woman I'll call Sandra. $900,000 saved, retired at 60. Her advisor suggested pulling $90,000 in year 1 to give herself room. Her MAGI hit $90,000. She lost her subsidy eligibility. Her insurance bill went up by $18,000 that year. She only needed $60,000 to live on. That extra $30,000 in withdrawals cost her $18,000 in insurance. That's not a tax problem. That's a sequencing problem. And it's exactly what the MAGI target is designed to prevent. Your MAGI target is the first number to know before you touch anything. Second is the gap itself, your healthcare gap number. This is the total cost of coverage from your retirement date to your Medicare start date at 65. Not an estimate, an actual quote. Go to healthcare.gov, enter your age, your state, your expected income. It takes 10 minutes and it's free. What comes back is your real number. Not a national average, not a range from an article, the actual premium for your zip code and your situation. A viewer reached out after doing this for the first time at 62. He was planning to retire at 63. The quote for him and his wife came back at $1,340 a month. 3 years to Medicare meant $48,240 in premiums alone, not counting deductibles. He wasn't derailed by it, but he adjusted his withdrawal plan around it, which he couldn't have done if he'd never looked it up. The formula is simple years until 65 times 12 times your monthly quote. That's your healthcare gap number. It belongs in your retirement plan the same way your mortgage payoff date does. Third is runway your bridge runway. This one is about sequence of returns risk. The short version is this: if the market drops in your first year or 2 of retirement, and you're forced to sell investments to cover expenses, you lock in those losses permanently. The math doesn't recover the same way it does when you're still contributing. The protection is a bridge, cash and short-term, stable assets that cover your spending gap, monthly expenses minus any guaranteed income, for at least 24 months. So if the market gets ugly early, you're not selling equities at the bottom. You're drawing from the bridge while you wait. The calculation: take your monthly baseline spend, subtract whatever guaranteed income you have coming in. Social Security, if you've claimed it, pension, rental income, and that difference is your monthly gap. Multiply by 24. That's the minimum bridge runway worth having before you retire. If that number is sitting in stable assets already, you have real protection. If it's all invested in the market, your first bad year hits harder than it needs to. These 3 numbers don't require a financial advisor to calculate. They require about 2 to 3 hours and a willingness to look at what you've been putting off. Once you have all 3, something shifts. You stop deciding based on a vague sense of readiness. You make it based on actual costs, actual structure, actual runway. Which means when you say one more year, you know whether you mean it or whether you're just avoiding the math. Remember David from the beginning of this video. Friday night. Spreadsheet open. $720,000 in the account. Everything looks fine on paper, and yet he closes the laptop and decides, again, one more year. That moment isn't about the money. It's about not having the three numbers that would tell him what the money actually needs to do. If you're in a similar spot right now, 59, 60, 61, somewhere in that window, here's a simple way to check where you actually stand. Do you know your MAGI target? The income ceiling that keeps you in ACA subsidy range once you stop working. Have you run your healthcare gap number? The actual dollar total, not a guess, a real quote, of what coverage costs from your retirement date to Medicare. Do you have 24 months of bridge runway? Stable, non-market assets that cover your spending gap without forcing you to sell investments if the market turns early. If the answer to all three is yes, you're not waiting because you have to. You're waiting because you want to, and that's a completely different situation. If the answer to any of them is no, that's the real reason for one more year, not the balance, the gap in the plan. I'm not going to tell you this is easy to sit down and calculate. Getting a real ACA quote, mapping your withdrawal sequence, running the bridge math, it takes an afternoon. Maybe two. It's not complicated, but it does require actually doing it, which most people keep moving to next weekend. That's understandable. It's also what keeps the decision feeling harder than it is. What I've seen consistently is that the people who do this work early, before they need to, don't just end up more prepared. They end up with a choice. They can retire when they want to or keep working because they genuinely want to, not because the math is still unclear. That's what the planning is actually for. If something in this video shifted how you're thinking about the gap, drop a comment below. Tell me which of the three numbers you haven't calculated yet. I read them, and it helps me understand what to cover next. And if you want to go deeper on the Roth conversion side of this, how to use that 60 to 65 window to reduce your tax bill and protect your subsidy eligibility at the same time. That's the next video. It's worth understanding before you make any moves.